All right, let's do this. We're live. Hey, Amy.
Hey Duke, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for coming back on the show with me. It's always awesome to see you, and I always love our conversations. So thanks so much for being here.
Oh, not a problem. I think your show's probably my favorite that I've been on. So anytime we can come and chat, I'm like, yes, gonna go hang out with Duke for today. This is awesome.
You just made my day. I appreciate
Well,
that.
there you go.
Yeah.
Happy
No,
Columbus
but
Day.
oh yeah, same to you. This is my favorite holiday by
It's
far.
like the
Columbus
best,
Day.
seriously, right up
Yeah,
there with Flag Day. I mean, honestly,
definitely. Yeah, it's definitely like the most relevant holiday for sure.
I know,
And yeah, I'm really excited for all the festivities.
I know the parades, the food. I mean,
Oh yeah. Oh
the
yeah. It's
Columbus Day
incredible.
turkey. It's just
It's just incredible. Ah,
really is.
so excited. Yeah, I had no idea it was Columbus Day until like 30 seconds ago when you told me that. And I was like, "Oh
I didn't
yeah,
realize
that's
it till
probably
I went
why
to the
my kids
post
are not at
office.
school today."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's terrible. I mean, you love the holiday as a kid, right? Because you get out of school. But any other time of your life, you're like, it's kind of a useless holiday. So, or at least uneventful. So,
It used to be my favorite thing. Like when I went to Christian schools, it never happened. But when I switched over to public schools, we would get off. We would have the day off back in the day for like Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah,
wow.
like some a couple of the Jewish holidays that
Yeah.
like I had nothing to do with, so there was no celebration there. It was just like a free day off, and I was always so
Yeah.
grateful.
Yep.
I always
It's
loved
like,
that so
yes, I
much.
love these.
It's like, yes, I didn't have to do anything to get this day off.
I know. Don't even know how to pronounce it right, but I get the day off. So, hoorah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I probably said it wrong. Excuse me. I'm sorry to all
We're
my
so
Jewish
sorry.
friends if I said it wrong. But thank you. Thank you for your service and those free days off. I appreciate it. But anyway, Amy, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. I probably already said that, but I'm pumped. I'm pumped for our conversation, our discussion. I'm really excited. Congratulations for the new book release. Mama
Yeah.
Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, and I'm just excited to dive into some of these things. But you must be excited. I've been looking just on Amazon. I know it's for sale in other places too, but I've been looking on Amazon, and it's only been out for a few days, right? 5, 6 days,
Yeah.
and already like just tons of reviews, really great reviews. 5 stars, still at 5 stars, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, it's easy, but also like ranking high in a lot of the categories and stuff like that. And so it's pretty cool. It's exciting. How do you feel
Yeah.
about it?
It is. It's really exciting. It was so funny. Probably the coolest moment. So I've been kind of like a writing nerd since I was a kid. Like I always thought it would be the coolest thing ever to go into a bookstore and to be like, hey, do you have this book by, I'd say my name pretending I'm not that person. And I always like thought that it would be so cool if they said, okay, we do, but it's sold out, or we do and it's over there. And it was kind of neat because the Wednesday before it was released, I was walking around our church, and we have kind of a larger church. We've got a church bookstore, and I just wandered into the bookstore, and I wanted to see if our first Mama Bear book was in stock. And I went, and then there was the Mama Bear Guide to Sexuality. They got an early copy, and it was sitting there on the shelf. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool life moment to not only be able to
Mm.
see something that I wrote, and you see your name on the spine and everything there, but then to have it be at my own church's bookstore. That the first time I got to see it, I was just like, this is so cool. And yeah, I was such a nerd about it. I like called up my husband, and it was terrible. I was like, I saw my book, and I'm like tearing up, and he's like, you have to teach a class. I'm like, I'm trying to keep it together. And it was just, yeah, I was a wreck.
No, that's so great. For real, it's so exciting, and I'm excited because I know um, the other books that have come out from Mama Bear Apologetics have done super well. I know that they've blessed so many people, and really have become a just remind me, what was the name of the book that we spent a good amount of our of the last time you were on the show that we talked about? It was the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to
Oh, yeah. Mom Bear, our first Mom Bear Apologetics is just understanding culture and helping kids understand
okay,
the lies that
yeah,
empowering your kids stand firm against this regular culture. So it was addressing all sorts of great issues. And we had so many great contributors like Elisa Childers, TC Cannon, and, covering all these main topics like progressive Christianity, scientism. It was such a great book. And yeah, it's been something that moms especially, but parents in general have been wanting, because a lot of folks just don't have the time to read all these great sources. And so when you can when you can synthesize all of that and compile it
Mm,
together in a super accessible book that has funny parenting stories from fellow parents who are trying to make it work and trying to do well, it is such a blessing. It's a way. It's almost like you're having a conversation with each of these people, and that's what's so great about the chapters is it's this awesome conversation that you get to have to where you get to think critically about these topics and
mm,
kind of flex your thinking muscles a little bit. And then it also gives you the practical at the end of it to where, okay, well, here's how we can explain it to our kiddos. Here's what we can pray about in there. And so it's really trying to give this kind of whole person look of let's not just look at what the world says, let's do it in as unbiased a fashion as possible, which can be hard even within the church, is let's look at what they're actually saying. Okay, but what are the realities of this? Here's how the Bible speaks to this, and here's how to tell your kids about it and to talk and raise up this next generation, which is so needed.
mm. Yeah, that's it's awesome, and what I was gonna say is that it's really become like a sort of like a standard in this area of teaching and apologetics and training, and, I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. So you co-authored, right, this book, with Hillary, um, I don't you need to 'cause I know I'm gonna mess up her last name, so can you say
Ferrer.
it for me? Ferrer?
Yeah, it's Hillary Ferrer, Hillary Morgan Ferrer. So yeah, we had a fun time. We basically spent all of COVID lockdown doing research and writing this book, and it was fun because there was even one point, I think it was January, to where we because she lives in Iowa and I'm here in Texas, so we got an Airbnb. We had this whole little cottage here in Texas. I think it was like not Waxahachie, but it was somewhere. And oh, it was neat because we just got to have this little house, and she brought her cat, and we basically, this chapter, the sex positivity chapter, was a direct result of that little vacation. But yeah, Jesus, coffee,
Mm.
and Cheez-Its kind of made this book come together, and yeah, it was a neat experience.
That's awesome. That would have been that'd be a good title for your next book, Jesus, Coffee, and Cheez-Its.
Right,
I
like
feel like that would
how to survive parenting and to write a book in a process.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. That's the way to do it. I've wanted to do that so many times, just like go and get away and
Yeah.
just write for a weekend or a long weekend or whatever. I think that that's so cool when you can do that, especially when you're maybe even in like the finalizing stages and stuff like that, just to kind of go and get away from the normalcy of life
Mm.
and to have that sort of set apart time to really think and to think clearly and to get your thoughts out and stuff like that. So super cool that you guys had that opportunity to do that. Amy, would you do one thing for me? I do want to bring the volume down just a little bit.
Okay.
I was checking it out and I would think so. Let's just bring it down to 100, and
100.
that should put us in a pretty good spot. And I'll double check in a few minutes and and see
Yeah.
where we're at once I get around to it.
Especially
But
getting excited. It's like, "Oh, it gets loud."
I appreciate that. No, 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 you're good. You're good. Anyway, I would love to. You've been on the show before, which is why I didn't go through the whole like typical introduction kind of a thing. But for the benefit of anybody who's watching, listening, that is not familiar with what we're talking about, if you would just take a few minutes here before we dive into some specifics of the book, if you would just share a little bit about who you are, what the Mama Bears are really all about, and then we can get into some other stuff.
Yeah, so I'm Amy Davison. I am a mom who is an Air Force veteran, and I never expected to get into apologetics. That was a total God thing. I had always thought I was going to end up being a storm chaser, and instead, I get to go and make a ministry of just helping other moms love God and love Him with their minds and help their kids to do the same. So it's just been amazing. I got my master's degree at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in apologetics, and upon graduating, I ended up connecting with Hillary and we just hit it off. We started doing podcasts together and writing. And so the Mama Bear Ministry is a great ministry of moms and people who do the momming of others. We joke Hillary doesn't have kids of her own, but she's kind of the mama bear of the mama bears, to where she heads things up. And we've got Lindsay Medenwalt on our team and a bunch of other amazing ladies. And we take apologetic topics, worldview topics, culturally relevant issues that are happening in the news, and we just write about them from a Christian perspective. And we a lot of the time we help people think critically about these. Lindsay does a great worldview series to where she addresses different worldviews from LDS to New Age movements, and how to have great conversation with people when you come into contact with them, and how to share the gospel more effectively. And so it's just a really fun ministry to be able to reach out and help other moms like understand the faith a little better, and give those practical tools on how to wield that armor of God a little more effectively, and raise up our kids how we were supposed to be warriors of the faith. And one of the ways we do that is we tackle ideas and we don't tear down people. So the one thing that
Mm,
we really
yeah,
kind of take an effort into is when we're addressing an idea, we're very careful to do it charitably and accurately as possible, but also without sparing the truth of it as well. So it really is that Colossians 4:6 of salt and grace that's right in there. Is yes, we're gonna love on you. We're not gonna tear you down as a person, but we are going to address maybe some problematic worldview issues. And so that is what our ministry is. And you can reach us at mamabearapologetics.com, just one big massive word. And yeah, we have blogs, we've got audio files, we got podcasts, we've got books, and we also travel around and speak. And so that is what our whole ministry is. It's just helping moms and parents in general. I mean, it could be youth leaders, it could be grandparents, dads. We don't discriminate. We just help them all
sure.
to be able to love God and help their kiddos to love God as well.
So good. Yeah, and I love that, and I love the focus there of being able to engage topics that are difficult and not shying away and cowering away. That's kind of we talked a lot about that on the last time you were on the show, episode 4. So for anybody who didn't catch that episode, I would really recommend going back and checking that out, because Amy shared some amazing, just dropping truth bombs and just some truth. And Amy always challenges me to think more deeply and to think more critically, and I love that you do that. I love even that's a focus with raising children and raising teenagers, and helping parents to help their children learn how to think critically, and to be able to have these conversations about things that are not always easy conversations. They're not always fun. They're often messy,
Yeah.
but whether we're engaging with our own family members, or we're engaging with the world and engaging with culture, whatever it is, like, if we just ignore the big important conversations and issues of the day, then we're not going to be any better off for it. We're going to be worse off for it. And we're actually, if we're talking about raising children and teenagers and stuff like that, we're going to be setting them up for failure. One of the things that stuck out to me that you said to me in the last episode when you were on, you said, if something is being marketed to your kids, then you want to be basically the first in line to talk to them about it. You don't want to be quiet about that and naive and pretend like our kids are not actually dealing with these difficult and challenging issues of the day, whether we're dealing with, sex and sexuality, hookup culture, like these different things that kids are being exposed to at an early age.
Yeah.
We can disconnect from those things and pretend, like, think that we're in some kind of bubble, and like these things are not actually, well, not my kids, like
Yeah.
pretend
Oh
that they're
yeah.
not actually that they're not actually happening. But the truth is, like, if you are aware, if you as a parent or as a leader or whatever, like, if you're aware that there is a systematic approach to um presenting children at younger and younger ages
Hmm.
with material that is designed to shape them in a way that is completely unbiblical, and to get them to think about things and have access and be exposed to things at ages where they're not equipped to even deal with it yet.
Hmm.
And so as parents and as leaders, I just love the approach of, let's be upfront, let's be open, let's be honest, let's create the opportunity for dialogue and conversations, and let's attack these issues and these challenges head on, where we're not just, what is it, like, ignorance as a strategy, or we're not just
Yeah.
using, like, let me just pretend these things aren't happening, and using that as a strategy, because that's not a strategy.
Yeah.
And so actually helping our kids to be set up for success and learning how to engage in culture, but with a biblical mindset and biblical worldview.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I love that you mentioned ignorance, because I think it's one of those things that often sneaks into our idea of shepherding our child's innocence. Like we
Mm,
want our kids to be innocent. I mean, you're a parent, I'm a parent. Um, probably people watching are as well. I mean, that's one thing we want, right? We don't want to have these conversations with kiddos. And years ago, back when we were kids, it was easier to avoid because it wasn't in their cartoons. And now it's like it's right here, you know. It's
Yeah.
such easy access. And so often, to try and maintain our kids' innocence, we do default into ignorance and trying to put them in that
Mm.
bubble like we talked about before. And the bubble just doesn't work, because if they're outside your doors for any number of moments or hanging around any other kids, to include Christian kids, they're going to get exposed to this stuff. And yeah, like you said, the especially the secular sexual agenda is working so hard to get kids at younger and younger ages, because there's a psychologist who was watching, do you know about the Sesame Street, how they had the Family Day episode here not too long ago? It was to show all different types of families, and so they had a homosexual couple with a child. It was
Mm.
two men, um, with a child, and it was presented very, very neutrally. It was just, oh, look, your family likes to cook, so does mine. Your family likes to dance together in the living room, so does mine. You know, it's just, oh, look, we're all the same. And one of the psychologists who was watching it, they said, oh my gosh, this is so great, because we're able to, she said, kids are so accepting, especially when they don't have the any biases yet. And so this is
Mm.
so great when we can reach them when they're young, because then they'll just accept it, and this is so good, and they haven't had those biases. And what she was referring to again is the religious influence of the parents. Most little kids, especially Sesame
Sure.
Street age kids, have not been taught this stuff, or they're not even actively practicing it. I'm not saying, you know, a 3-year-old is going to be amazing at critical thinking, but still, you know, the groundwork hasn't even been laid yet. And she was actually praising that. She said, oh, this is such a good thing. And she phrased it, I mean, so well, to where it's like, oh, it's awesome, they're just going to accept it. But really, that kind of exposes the motivation of this agenda. Is if we can get them, there's this great drummer quote that says, get them while they're young and bend their mind. And that's exactly what
Wow.
we're seeing happen. Is if we can get them young, if they haven't been taught to think well, if they don't even recognize it, they're just going to swallow it so easily, and it's going to be there. And the church typically doesn't start talking until middle school and high school. So you can imagine, from the
Mm.
time of Bubble Guppies, which Bubble Guppies had a drag queen on one of their shows, from the time of Bubble Guppies all the way to the time they're middle school, the world has been able to disciple your kiddo, and you're just getting
Wow.
in the game at middle school. I'm not
Wow.
saying it's something that we can't accomplish or that Christ cannot overcome. He can overcome all things, but there's going to be a lot more work involved if we wait. So yeah, we want to be first in line, because the world is already trying to be there.
Wow. Something that you said on the last time you were on, something that you said that I was actually unaware of, is that the average age for, you know, children being exposed to things like pornography and stuff like that is like 8, I think you said. It
Yeah,
was
and
like
that's a
super
general
young.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, cuz I know for me, and I probably brought this up, but I was unintentionally exposed to pornography when I was 9.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, it's just one of those things where as parents, I don't think a lot of times you don't really you just don't know. You don't
Yeah.
know, and you don't know what's going, like, I was so, like, for me, I was at a Christian school,
Mhm.
and we did not have cell phones, like, that was not a thing, and if we did, they definitely wouldn't have been able to access the internet.
Yeah, you would have had,
Um
like, Snake.
And, like, I had, there were kids that were bringing in, you know, magazines, like,
Mhm.
whatever they were, with Playboy or whatever they were,
Yeah.
stuff like that, like, into school, and, you know, just kinda, like, seeing things that I didn't expect to see, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it does something. It changes you, because it makes you aware of something that you weren't previously aware of, and now there's all these, like, questions, and there's all these things that are going on in the mind of, like, a kid that isn't really, you know, supposed to be at that stage of life yet. And now it's just, I can't even imagine, like, everything is just so accessible. Like, if your child grabs your phone for 8 seconds, like, they could already be discovering, like, you know, some pretty intense stuff. So it's just, you know, it's just such, because of the accessibility of everything that we have today. I do think that as parents, we definitely need to be vigilant, and you know, be as aware as we can of what's going on. We're not going to be aware of everything. We're not going to be able to protect them and shield them from everything. So then, you know, I think being having that openness, to create those conversations and discussions and dialogues in the home and in the church, I think becomes so important. Do you remember? I don't know if I asked you about this last time or not. Just like I think that the majority of this of as when we're talking about kids, the
Mhm.
majority of this of the weight of this of having these conversations and educating our children properly on sex and sexuality and stuff like this, that the majority of that weight should fall on the parents. But how much of that do you think should be taken care of in the church as well?
I think it needs to be a regular discussion point because it was always an aspect. I would even argue it's even an aspect of faith that this is a whole part of how God designed us. So it's something that the church shouldn't be shy about discussing because I mean, gosh, have you read Song of Solomon? I mean, good night. He wasn't talking about
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
getting fun in the produce section. This these were all metaphors and things. So these are something that it shouldn't be something that is taboo. It should be something that is
Mm,
regularly talked about within the church because, again, we need to be able to have these safe places to be able to wrestle with these issues and to not feel shy about asking questions. Because I think all kids have questions, and I think a lot of adults have questions too. And we need that safe
mm,
space to be vulnerable and to discuss things. And yeah, like you were saying, the average age for pornography exposure, and this is low ball, is 8 years old. A lot of kids are a lot younger because again, it's easily accessible on phones. I mean, gosh, you can go into Walmart and most toddlers, if they're capable of holding a phone, most of them have a phone in their hand and they're watching
mm,
some sort of show. And a lot of kids cartoons, there's not really going to be nudity in them. There is going to be a lot of LGBTQ influences that's creeping in now. So you've got that coming in. But then for the older kids, you can't even go on Amazon and avoid it. So, I mean, and
mm,
there have even been parents that have lamented to us to where, okay, we put blocks on our kids' phones and all this other stuff. But then it's once their email gets out on these mailing lists, a lot of them will just have it completely emailed to them. So, not to mention,
wow.
you go on Netflix or any streaming service, and there's going to be stuff, and even commercials nowadays are so hypersexualized to where it's
Mm,
funny. Carl's Jr. had these commercials for a while that had these women in scantily clad lingerie, and they would be eating a burger, and it's like that's so unnecessary. But my son would be like, "Oh my gosh, I need the eye bleach," and he'd like flip the control and everything to a different channel, and yeah,
yeah.
it's one of those things to where it is so prevalent with culture now. It's a punchline in every single sitcom to where we as a church, we need to be speaking about it regularly because the world already is. And so we need to
Wow.
be that safe place. And there's so many people within the church and not just church members, but even pastors and things who, because of early childhood exposure, they have become addicted to pornography, but now it's closeted. They're hiding it, and they're absolutely terrified of their congregation or their fellow pastors finding out about it, and they're not seeking help. And so this needs to be
Mm,
something that is regularly interacted with because again, it's an active struggle, just like all temptations. It We talk about everything from drunkenness to holding our tongues. We need to be also talking about sex too. It's very important.
yeah. Yeah, and, like, as you were talking, one of the things I was thinking of, I just wonder how often this happens, like, we have my kids have tablets and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and, the video games, and so there'll be, like, child locks on them, so me or my wife, we have to enter in a code before they can get into the tablet or, whatever it is, and there's been times where for me, like, my son has come to me, just multiple times, like, to enter in the code so that he can get to where he wants to get, and so I'll put the code in for him, and then like he'll accidentally log out and he'll come back
Mhm.
and ask me to put the code in again. I wonder like how many times parents just get frustrated and they just don't want to do that anymore, so they're just like here, and they just like unlock it and let them have it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so just like kind of out of sight out of mind, sort of, where when if kids having access to just having access to technology where like we see them and yeah, like you said, they're watching bubble guppies or they're watching, whatever they're watching, like they're
Mhm.
watching something that's not a big deal. But then, there's always that opportunity for something to slip through the cracks or for them to go to the wrong place or for
Yeah.
them to even become curious because they see an advertisement for something like, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That don't even know what that's gonna be, but then just going after stuff and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, and how many
yeah.
of us parents do we have those locks on our own phone? Because I think of like my kids,
Oh.
sometimes we'll pass our phone to them. Like my son, he doesn't have access to his phone, but he's got like a space game that he's downloaded on mine to like have this rocket land on the moon. And it's okay. Wait, do I have the security features on my phone? Because yeah, you can just hop on anything. Or gosh, I think the easiest access is just TikTok. I mean, so many
Yeah.
parents allow their kids to be on TikTok,
TikTok
but
is
the thing is,
nuts.
you can't filter TikTok like at all. I mean, yes, it will eventually sort of, okay, if you're one of those people that love cat videos, right? And you keep hearting the cat videos,
Right.
it'll send you more cat videos, right? But it's still going to send you things that are inappropriate. And that's one thing, like whenever I see one of the little neighbor kids running around with TikTok on his phone, I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like
Mm.
I hopped on it one time. I did like one swipe up, and there were people in lingerie doing dances for titillation and everything, and I'm just like, you can't block that stuff. So your little kid trying to look up their friends singing fun little Disney songs, they're going to see that, and so it's
Yeah.
one of those to where, especially when it comes to social media access, you can't really filter that out. They've got great programs. Bark is one of them that's really good, to have on your phone and that sort of thing. But again, if they have any sort of access, not only can they see things, but then other people can watch what they're producing. And so there have even been moms, that I've read about, who have posted videos of like their daughter's gymnastic competitions, totally neutral stuff, to where there
Right.
have been overseas pornography websites that have taken images from
Oh,
those videos,
yeah.
and now they're on those sites. And it's, you just can't keep the world out, unfortunately. So you have to know how to navigate within the world, and that's how we were always supposed to do things too, is to be in it but not of it, and know how to navigate it healthfully. And
Mm.
yeah, it's definitely more challenging nowadays because of how vulnerable social media and internet access has made us.
Yeah, and, like, man, like, TikTok is a crazy one. Another one is YouTube, and like you
Yeah.
said, if you they learn your tendencies, so if you're
Mhm.
watching a bunch of videos about cats or whatever, like, they're gonna keep showing you that stuff.
Yeah.
But what they will also do, and I believe that they've actually cleaned this up, but what they'll also do is they'll send you stuff that people in your demographic are likely to also like, because their
Mhm.
goal is always to get you to stay on the thing for longer
Yeah,
than,
social dilemma, that.
for as long, yeah, the social dilemma. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So they want to get you to stay on there for as long as, maybe that's where this thing I'm about to say, it might have come from there. Um, that so like one thing that was happening was like with young girls, like 12, 13, 14-year-old girls that
Mhm.
would be interested in stuff like fitness and working out and things like that, so that they would be doing that kind of stuff, but then the algorithm was actually also sending them stuff that a lot of that they were that the algorithm is just what it is, it's a computerized thing, right? So the algorithm knows that girls that are in this age group that are interested in fitness, typically they're also interested in stuff dealing with eating disorders and things of
Mm.
that nature. And so they'll like a lot of girls that were not typically interested in those kinds of things, now all of a sudden there's this new content that's coming out after, like coming toward them, that's just right there, that seems like it's in the same genre, but now they're being exposed to an ideology that goes
Yeah.
beyond just I'm interested in a fitness video. And so I do think that there has been some work to clean up some of that kind of stuff, because it did get pretty malicious in certain things, especially with like teenagers and things like that, where stuff
Yeah.
was, if you're interested in this, you might also like this, but the
Mhm.
you might also like this is bringing you into another level of something that's not going to be good for your mental health.
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's really interesting when you look at it from a girl perspective and a boy perspective, like, how this market, how it markets to them differently, but in this sort of cyclical, um, kind of the cycle of brokenness that you see. So girls from a young age are groomed to eventually perform. So it starts out
Mm.
really innocuously, like when they're little. I'm saying like 5 and under. The toys are pretty cutesy. It's those little animals that are dressed up in the little clothes, and they have the
Yeah.
doll houses and things. But about the time your kid gets older than 5, your girl gets older than 5. If you look at the toys that are marketed to them, they're highly sexualized. I mean, I'm talking LOL Surprise, Bratz dolls, the older LOL dolls. I mean, these gals are dressed up like streetwalkers. I mean, I'm talking fishnet stockings, mini skirts, this very seductive makeup, pouty lips, all of this stuff, to where girls are being groomed. They're in this observer role at first, and they're saying, okay, this is what's pretty, this is what's attractive, even in girls' cartoons. they surveyed the 10 most popular cartoons for girls, and they found that girls were in hypersexualized roles or even degrading roles in every single cartoon, like multiple
Wow.
episodes of trying to use their looks to get away with things or being pouty, or or somebody was making an off comment to them, and these were just on little kids cartoon shows for girls. And so the APA actually did a study for the hypersexualization of girls because they saw this as being
Mm,
a problem, and this went on for
wow.
15 years, and it sort of blew them away because yes, it's this strategic grooming of girls to where, okay, here's what's pretty and attractive, and the girls are recognizing that. They did a study on 6 to 9 year old girls to where they gave them paper dolls that had the only difference in these dolls were their outfits. You had one who was just like me, like just t-shirt and jeans, regular stuff. And then they had a girl who was in like Daisy Dukes, crop top, the high heels, the pouty makeup. And they asked these girls who were 6 to 9 years old, okay, which one's going to be most popular? And they picked the scantily clad girl. And they said, okay, girls, which one do you want to be as your ideal self? And they picked the gal who was dressed
Mm,
very scantily clad. So a
yeah.
lot of parents, we like to think, oh, our little girl's too young for this sort of thing. And no, she's
Right.
not. I mean, these are 6 to 9 year olds who are saying, nope, this is how you get there. And then you throw into, as they start transitioning into later elementary, early middle school, the social media aspect. Now they're being groomed by the like button to where, as you
Mm,
see in that show social media, or the social dilemma, is girls are seeking that outside validation, and then you throw in the filters. So it's okay, if I start acting like these girls, I get more hearts like these girls, and now all of a sudden you see that
right.
moral
Yeah.
compromise,
Yeah.
which was portrayed so beautifully. And by beautiful, I just mean like in a broken sense, in the movie Cuties. You had this normal girl who was playing jump rope, what we would think of stereotypical girl behavior, going all the way to the extreme at the end of the movie to not only seductive dancing, but posting nude photos of herself on social media, all for the attention that it brought. And so then you look from the boys aspect, which, like you mentioned, you were exposed at 8 years old. Well, I'm sure you've noticed for video games, once you get out of the Minecraft stage, all the gals are just
Right.
very seductive. And it's, if you notice, the girls in these older video games are dressed the same way as the dolls that our little girls are being marketed towards. And so the boys are now being presented with, this is what beauty looks like. This is your ideal beauty standard. And not only that, most girls in the video games and in the movies, a common factor is sexual aggression, to where there will be like, oh, they
Mm,
shoved the guy against the wall and are making out with them, that sort of thing. So now the guys are thinking, okay, wait, aggression is now a normal part of intimacy. And
wow.
this is actually what girls want. And the girls are now watching this and saying, okay, wait, this is how I'm supposed to behave to be attractive to guys. So this is how I have to
Wow.
behave. The guys are being told this is what you want. And it's this awful cycle of brokenness that is just
Mm,
being perpetuated by culture. And when a lot of these companies like LOL, I believe it was Mattel, that was behind these dolls, they were like, okay, wait, why are you producing this stuff for young kids? And they just said, well, it's popular. And that's what it is we have this. I think as parents, we want to think that children's companies are going to look out for the best interests of our child, and that's false. That's absolutely false.
yeah.
They're not. They're in it for the money. And to
Oh,
put
yeah.
it very bluntly, they're in it for what's popular, and so they're going to help mold what's popular, and ultimately they're in what sells. And we didn't notice that, our generation, especially 80s 90s, we didn't really notice that because I think the world's understanding of sexuality and the biblical model were pretty similar. Most shows had a mom, a dad, and kids. And now culture has shifted. It has shifted to reflect exactly what we see, and so many people are shocked. And honestly, I think Christian parents, it kind of floors me a little bit how many Christian parents are surprised by this, but that's because they think, oh, well, if it's a children's company, it's out for my kid's best interest. No, they're not. They're out for your money,
Mm,
and they're out for whatever is going to keep the company going. And so they're going to go with culture. Culture is marketing this towards your kids. They're getting your kids hooked on it, and it's just this awful cycle. And that's kind of one of the things that I think for parents that sort of helps parents not be so scared to have these conversations or to recognize these issues, is to make them see that they're actually in a battlefield, and not that they're
wow.
in a battlefield, but that their kid is also in the same battlefield. And I think once we realize as parents that, wait a second, no, the world is not here to like Disney, Pixar, all of those, they're not here to nurture our children in the best way that we think is best. They're just here to keep a company going, and they're going to promote what the world promotes, because again, all art reflects the worldview of the artist. And so
Mm,
if you have a bunch of secular artists, which the
wow.
majority of the entertainment industry is highly influenced by the secular folks, they're going to be promoting a secular agenda. especially anything that's popular and isn't being currently canceled. So it's very important for us as parents to recognize that there is a battlefield, that we are in it, and so are our children. And you
Hmm.
cannot shepherd your children in the battlefield. You have to make them effective in the battlefield. And so it's the training has to start young because the world's already in it.
Wow. 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 Wow, that's so good. The that desensitization that occurs
Yeah.
is just crazy too, because it, like you said, it starts off so often as such a gradual thing,
Hmm.
and so often, we could be unaware of things. Oh yeah, it's just a little toy, like it's just a
Yeah.
doll, it's just whatever. But what's actually taking place in that little girl or little boy's mind, or whatever it is, if it's the video game, if it's the doll, if it's whatever, but like the change that's taking place in the mind without them even realizing it too, is just like this desensitization that's going on, where these things become more and more normal, and to
Hmm.
the point that, even when we talk, one of the things that we planned on talking a little bit about today was, that's included in the book, is the pornography discussion. And so often, like, what happens is, you'll just when you're when you're living for like self gratification, and
Hmm.
you understand that, like, even to this point, like you mentioned with the video games,
Hmm.
there's this thing that's taking place, like, okay, aggression, and there's these girls in the video games that are, scantily clad, like we're talking about, like Grand Theft Auto, whatever it might be, and like you as the dude that's running around, like you have the opportunity to just take advantage of women, at your, you know what I mean? They're just there. They're at your disposal. You can just kind of whatever. And it's a game. It's a fantasy. But what is that doing to the mind of that impressionable child or teenager or even an adult who's playing that? There's this desensitization that happens where, now that just becomes part of it's a piece of the puzzle. Like you said, that aggression just becomes coupled in their mind with sexuality and what that's all about. And so to the point where people now that, you're it's sort of like the natural progression that happens in the mind of a person whose mind is not being renewed by the word of God. It's this this downward spiral where it's like, I need more and more things, I need more and more intensity in order to satisfy that, whatever that thing is, whatever that hunger is, that desire that's
Yeah.
on the inside of me, that sexual whatever it is, that urge or whatever. And to the point where, like, that's why, there's so many things that are in existence today that are, so intense and hardcore and whatever, and more and more becoming a part of the natural, or the what's considered normal in society. So, getting a little bit into the conversation of sex positivity, um, I think that it probably started out from this thing of, like, there was for sure like this, maybe kind of combating against the whole like walk of shame mentality,
Yeah.
and like that double standard that existed between like men and women, of like
Hmm.
men can brag about whatever, sexual encounter or activity that they had, but like women, it was always like looked at as more of like a shameful thing or
Yeah.
whatever. There's sort of like that double standard that existed, to where sex positivity now, it's like, no, don't be ashamed, like, do that, have as many partners as you want and go after
Hmm.
this, and like it's cool, and it's so, and it's just, you know what I mean, it's like the free love thing. And to where even that has been exploited to, I think, mean something else today than how it started out.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know that that's something that's discussed in the book. So could you kind of explain a little bit about what sex positivity is, and we'll, kind of get into that conversation a little bit.
Yeah, so you touched on it really well. Is sex positivity is basically this movement that tries to remove any and all shame from any and all sexual activity. So it actually started, and it's been around for quite a while. It's just kind of gone through a rebranding. So there's a lot of the early sexual rights activists. When you think of like Margaret Sanger, Freud, all of those,
Mhm.
it was trying to take sexuality away from God. And the only way you can do that is if you get rid of all the standards that God had around sexuality. And so again, they sort of replace salvation and Jesus with sex and sexual expression. And so the way that you attain salvation and wholeness is through sexual expression. it's now like we often hear of it, especially for guys, right? You're always said, oh, it'll make a man out of you. Like, and it's funny. There was some show to where, yeah, it was this guy that was taking his 16-year-old son to a brothel to make a man out of him, right? And that was always,
Mm.
it's now become a stage of development of you're not a whole person. And I think any show that has ever had a Christian character in it, they're usually a virgin and they're usually ridiculous. And that's often what they're made fun of is, oh, they're so bumbling. You're not a whole person. Like, think of Clueless, right? Remember the big insult in Clueless is you're just a virgin who can't drive. It's like, okay, wait, all right, the can't driving thing, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. But since when did being a virgin now all of a sudden mean I'm less than a person? And it's just sort of this viewpoint of and Nadia Boltz-Weber, a lot of she refers to it within her church as this is just a way of growth and development. Like this is how you become a more mature
Mm.
adult. And even in this, there's a show called Atypical, and the two lead characters in there, like the big thing she was excited for is from them to have sex, and now that's what made them an adult. And not like paying taxes or holding
Right.
down a job or being, that's not being an adult. It was the fact that they had sex that made them an adult. And so
Mm.
sex positivity is this, again, it's trying to take away any structure that is bound around sex. So if you're in a relationship and you want to be a swinger, totally good. As long as consent, there's two big components in it, consent and pleasure. Nadia Boltz-Weber likes to throw in kindness too, to say that you're being thoughtful of another person. It's okay,
Okay.
that's fine. Um, she can toss that in there. It doesn't work, but so consent and pleasure are big things. As long as you and your partner are consenting to it and it gives you pleasure, then it's good. But the problem is you can consent and get pleasure from all sorts of awful things. Our prisons are full of people who have done just that. So
Mhm.
consent and pleasure cannot be a basis of morality because consent only says what you're agreeing to, and pleasure just says that it gave you pleasure. It doesn't say whether something is good or right. But that's again, they're trying to take away God's standards. They have to put a replacement in its spot, right? Because there can't be a vacuum there. So they have to put something in there. And so they've put consent and pleasure. And interestingly enough, the only way to be sex negative, and it's funny that so there's apps on your cell phone that women download for tracking menstrual cycles, and so they'll have health articles, things like exercise and that sort. So they're innocuous stuff. And how I found out about it was through one of those articles, and it said that the only way to be sex negative was to believe in heterosexual monogamous sex. That
Okay.
that's sex negative. So the Christian the Christian viewpoint of sex, that's sex negative. Everything else is sex positive. So
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of like, wait,
Good to know.
hold on. Oh, I'm sorry, what?
I just said good to know.
I know. There you go. So there you go. It's very easy to understand sex positivity. Is the yeah. If you believe in heterosexual monogamous sex within marriage, you're sex negative, and sex positive is everything else. So at most, like the best thing they give us is that sex is called vanilla sex. So it's like you're
Okay.
just the standard flavor. The rest is all the fun flavors with the sprinkles and the rainbow colors. That's everybody else. But cisgender sex is that's the vanilla, that's the sex negative. And so
Mm.
yeah, it's funny because it's how it's being marketed in cultures. Oh, this is how we find true freedom, is just going out, and this is how you gain development, this is how you know yourself. It's being argued as, okay, this is how to know yourself more deeply. This is how you're able to grow and to mature, is through having multiple sexual partners. You shouldn't feel guilty from it. And yes, some of it does stem from, like you pointed out, those sort of biased double standards, right? If a guy sleeps around, he's a stud. If a girl sleeps around, she's a slut.
Right.
And
Right.
it's funny because so what you quoted there was actually quoted by one of the producers for that awful Cardi B song WAP, and she said the main reason why they made that song was to level the sexual playing field. They said it's not fair that guys can sing about this in rap songs and all of their sexual escapades and slapping around the women. They get to sing about it, but us girls can't. So we're, instead of saying, okay, wait a second, maybe what the guys are doing is super broken and messed up, they just
Mhm.
said, wait, no, to be equal, we got to be just as messed up. And it's like, oh my
Wow.
gosh, come on, folks. So yeah, we discussed that in the book. In fact, that was the main chapter that came of our little camp out that we had for writing this book. Is I just sat down there. I'm like, okay, what is sex positive? And went and diving in and just busted it out. And yeah, so it's the only thing that really matters is pleasure and consent. You're not allowed to judge anyone. So that's a huge thing. Is you cannot say that anything that anybody else does is wrong. That's also another sign of sex negative. So if you have a friend who says, oh yeah, I looked up some guys online, never met them before. and went on Tinder, found a couple guys, slept with a few guys this weekend. How was your Sunday? You can't be like, whoa, that may not be a good idea. That's you being sex negative. You're not allowed to say that. Same with
Whoa.
if you
Yeah.
have a married couple and they want to bring in, or even, a third person in, fourth person. You can't, if you advise them, hey, that's probably not good for your marriage, that's not good for your health.
Yeah.
You're being sex negative. So there's an active component within sex positivity to deprogram yourself as if you're coming out of a cult. So you not only have to silence your inner conscience, you actually have to completely shut down the Holy Spirit whatsoever, or altogether. So the Holy Spirit is leading you in conviction to saying, no, sleeping around with a bunch of girls is not appropriate. That's you being sex negative. That's the Holy Spirit being sex negative. So you need to not listen to the leading of God. And
Wow.
another big thing is there's no taboos, which, in some ways we can say, okay, this is a good thing, because there were some teachings, especially within strict fundamentalist sectors, that basically if you, especially as a woman, if you got any form of enjoyment from sex, you were sinning. So
Mm. Yeah.
they sort of overcorrected and now said, okay, well, anything you do with sex is now okay.
Right.
So they're trying to take away the taboo. So again, it's not finding, okay, wait, where has maybe the church gotten things wrong? It's no, let's go swing the complete opposite direction. Let's do a total 180. And so now we have no more taboos. So you can do anything. But again, this is really problematic because it not only denies medical science to some degree, because now we have this movement of, well, let's have safer sex. They don't call it safe sex anymore because they realize safe sex isn't possible.
Doesn't exist.
They call it safer sex, to where it's okay. You need to get regularly tested. You need to be active because you are having multiple partners, and they kind of downplay the result of not just STDs but the emotional fallout
Right.
from having multiple partners. They almost reject the emotional side of things. In fact, a lot of articles within Teen Vogue and oh gosh, there's another teen magazine, like even Cosmo. There's Cosmo for teens too. They'll tell kids that, okay, it's one of those things. It's like a muscle you have to work at. You may feel bad having, one night stands here and there, but with enough practice, those feelings start to go away. And this is what's being presented to kids is, okay, these feelings and convictions are actually something you need to sort of work out. You need to numb yourself to, and instead go for what brings you pleasure. Because this is, again, part of your development. This is part of your freedom. And yeah, it's overall, it's healthy. They do say that, yes, there's an increased risk of STDs. In fact, Planned Parenthood came out with a video to where one of the heads of Planned Parenthood said, okay, guys and gals, when you become a teen, you just kind of need to accept the fact that you're going to get an HP, or you're going to get HPV. I mean, she just said,
Wow.
oh, just accept it. This is what you're going to get.
Wow.
It's like, when did STDs become a life goal? Like, should not be a stage of development that we encourage kids to go through. But again, it's one of those things of they're having to acknowledge that there are implications for their actions,
Yeah.
for our actions. But they're just trying to downplay it as much as possible, because again, you want to present it in a positive light. And so yeah, it's just it's really sad, but it's also really attractive, because again, it gives this
Mm.
false view of freedom of, I can do whatever I want, there are no rules. But it also lies to the existence of objective truth too, because here we're saying, okay, anyone can do what they want, and there are no rules, but the only rule is you can't judge. So wait a second, we're denying objective only to affirm an objective as long as it benefits us. This doesn't work out, folks.
Wow.
And then of course, downplaying the psychological. There's a great book called Unprotected that really exposes the brokenness, especially among college campuses, because I mean, college campuses, right, that's kind of where everybody sort of loses their minds a little bit. And especially hookup culture within college campuses are leading to so much brokenness among today's youth that, yeah, there's increase in depression, drug and alcohol consumption. In fact, most teens who participate in hookup culture, especially the girls, have to get themselves drunk first. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to perform. They can't deal with it emotionally. And it's just like, wait a second, there's so much brokenness here. Why isn't anybody speaking into it? But because it's popular, because it's what's perpetuated in so many TV shows, especially shows geared toward kids, that they just think, oh, this is what life is. And they don't
Right.
recognize, wait a
Yeah.
second, no, this is the secular sexual worldview. It's very popular because unfortunately, unfortunately, Christian media hasn't really picked up a lot of steam yet. Like, we really need good, solid, and I'm not saying like the corny, leave it to, well, I like Leave It to Beaver actually, but those corny presentations. We need some realistic Christian views of how we can function as adults without being so consumed with this overt sexual expression. Because even in the TV shows, they downplay pregnancy is something that can be taken care of with abortion. They downplay the reality of STDs.
Mm,
Most people aren't even
yeah.
using condoms in any of these shows, so this is not a healthy sexual worldview at all. But because it's popular, because it's glamorized, because it's what the Hollywood stars are doing and the people in their ear pods are singing about, kids think this is just what life is. And no, there's a completely other life out there.
Wow.
Sorry, I feel like I rambled.
You did not ramble at all. That was all just really, really good. And the your perspective on this is just it's awesome, and I really do appreciate it. I appreciate what you were saying sort of toward the end there about, just basically being taught that or groomed by the secular ideology that says that this is just the way that it is. So just,
Mhm.
suck it up, get used to it. Like these are just they're just like, it's just part of
Minor
it. It's part
speed
of the
bumps,
package.
yeah.
Part of the package. Yeah. Yeah. And but just as you're talking, I'm just thinking about, well, yeah, that's why God designed it to exist
Mhm.
in a particular context. That's
Yeah.
why um, he created he created sex. He created us as, he created us with sexuality. He created us with a sex drive. He made us to um, this thing that exists for procreation but also for
Mhm.
enjoyment. He designed us that way, so it's not supposed to be taboo. It's not supposed to be something that we're just supposed to stay away from or shy away from, or like, my virgin ears, like, don't talk to me about that kind of thing. But we are supposed to understand the right context, because in the right context, it's amazing and does
Mhm.
not involve all of these unintended side effects and all of these unintended consequences. Like I can't tell you how. Well, I can tell you because I'm sure you know. Like it's the it's amazing to know that, like, in the context of my marriage with my wife, like, we have freedom and we have zero worries, zero
Mhm.
concern about, like, what if we get an STD? Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It does not exist.
Mhm.
And yet, it's vanilla, as you say, according to
I know.
the ideology, because it's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's awesome, and
Mhm.
the fact that it's not this thing where, we've gotta anytime that you have to build all of these, like, parameters around something to make people feel okay about it, it should
Yeah.
probably tell you that there's something inherently flawed in the ideology of what's going on there. And the truth is that God has he wants us to be absolutely free, and the way to be free is not just to pretend that consequences don't exist. The way to be free is not to just let go of all inhibitions and just do whatever makes you feel good in the moment. No,
Mhm.
freedom is not just what feels good in the moment. Freedom is about, like, how am I building a better life for myself? What are the long-term lasting benefits and the fruit of what I'm doing right now, the decisions that I'm making today? Because, all these decisions that we're making, we can look at it and we can say, well, this is just, it's for my benefit. It makes me feel good. It's what I like to do. Okay, but in the process, are you hurting yourself? Are you hurting
Mhm.
other people? Are you um, going down this path that's leading you into things like you mentioned, like with alcohol and substance abuse and things like that? And so maybe you touched on it, but maybe talk a little bit further about what some of those, like, unintended consequences are that sort of stem from this way of life and thinking, and that kind of comes as part of the package of, the sex positivity movement.
Yeah, so again, it's trying to take sex out of any sort of bounds within God's realm. And I think that's kind of one of the problems that we saw even within purity culture. Their goal was to stop people from having sex, right? It's like sex outside of marriage is inappropriate. Let's stop people from having sex outside of marriage. And what they don't realize is that this agenda isn't about having people have sex. This agenda is about taking it completely away from God, because we are made in the image of God, and it is only through one man, one woman, separated from their parents, joined together in holy union, do they become one flesh. Only that is representative of God and his relationship to the church, right? So it's trying to take all of that away. So it's not, I think one of the best things we can do is to understand sex is it's not an action, it is an expression of an entire worldview. And you actually see the implications of this worldview when you look at the sex positivity movement. So again, it gives this false view of freedom, because then anything goes, right? You can do whatever you want with whomever you want, with as many whips, lassos, sex dungeons that you can come up with. The problem is okay, wait, but what are those actions saying? And that's the thing, is
Mm.
they're not encouraging thinking about this issue. They just want you to react and again gain this pleasure. So it gives this false view of freedom, but there isn't any freedom there. It's only in bondage. And I'm sorry, there we have a small town,
Siren.
so whenever anything happens, the fire department goes and like everybody flies out. They're so excited. Okay, I think they're gone. Sorry about that, folks. Small town life. But really, so when you think about it, a great way to think about it is, if you can do anything you want with something, it has no value. So a perfect example of this is a paper plate. You can do whatever you want with a paper plate and nobody is going to freak out, right? You can draw on it, you can cut it up, you can put a big
Mm.
thing of lasagna on it like the commercial shows. It's just a paper plate. They're trying to equate the human body as a paper plate. You can do whatever you want. You
Right.
can sleep with whomever you want. You can do whatever you want to your body with however many people. But what is that actually saying? It's saying that you as a person have no inherent value. And in fact,
Mm.
your only value is in if you can bring pleasure to yourself or if you're gaining pleasure. So there's immense brokenness. Again, you see increased rates of suicide, depression, alcohol and substance abuse, just this whole disenchantment with the world. And then further on down the line, especially with hookup culture, what that does is, so when two people have sex, right, you have these chemicals that secrete in the brain called oxytocin and let's see, oh, I'm just blanking on it. I just had it. There's a guy version too. So you've got oxytocin, and this is released within the human brain. The female brain actually releases this too when she's nursing a baby to promote bonding within the baby. It's also promoted between the husband and wife together. So the guy has a very similar chemical. It starts with a D, and I'm just blanking on it right now because I'm on the spot. And this actually promotes not only bonding with the wife, but also bonding with the children. So it's this great design. God's design is absolutely amazing, and it helps nurture a family together. But it's total brokenness and chaos when you have it outside of that design, because here you have these bonds that are forming and breaking. And it causes, and it's so funny to say, especially to teens, but it causes literal brain damage to where now people who are finding, especially with
Mm.
pornography use and frequent hookups, they're finding that they have difficulty actually bonding with the other person. And in fact, it's so prevalent to where you'll hear TV shows, they often make fun of whoever's getting married as like, "Oh, wow, you're only gonna sleep with one person for the rest of your life." And
Yeah.
it's become this joke, but really what that is it's an exposure of their own brokenness. What they're saying is, "Oh, the idea of being with only one person for the rest of my life, I can't even fathom that being good." Because again, you need that, oh, that maybe that excitement from the first time from somebody new, and it really is just an exposure of their own brokenness. So yeah, you just see
Mm.
this worldview that's meant to be positive, but you're seeing it not only causes an increase of depression, suicide, alcohol, substance abuse, but also limits their ability to have a lasting marriage and be able to find love in that marriage. You know, you this whole wandering eye that you see so many happen, or it's happened so often in TV and everything else, the shows of guys, you know, getting distracted by girls, or girls going out for a night on the town to kind of, you know, flirt with other guys. Like this is all said to be normal, but no, this is actually the fallout of a very broken worldview, and you can see that from it. So here you, with the biblical standard, when you look at it and you see, okay, we're told in scripture to be nurtured by the breasts of the lover of one's youth. I mean, that's your wife from the first time is supposed to be nurturing for that. And that's the result. But then here you have the biblical world, or not the biblical, the secular sexual worldview. And the fallout is just, it's brokenness. Now, I'm not saying
Wow.
there aren't, like, it's brokenness for all people. Some people are totally fine living out a Dorian Gray lifestyle, but just because they're okay with it doesn't mean that it's good. We have to look at, okay, what actually is good, and for that we can only find in the biblical worldview.
Wow. Yeah, I love that too. Like one of the things that you write about in your book, I think it's actually one of the earlier chapters, and its title is "Sex is spelled WORLDVIEW, right? Like sex is spelled worldview.
Yeah.
And I love that point. That's such an important thing because, you know, the way that we were created and designed by God, and He created this thing called sex that exists, you know, in the context that He created it for, and it's wonderful. But like now, it's gotten to the point where, you know, sex and sexuality has, you know, we've labeled it an identity. You know, it's
Mm.
been
Yeah.
labeled by culture and society as an identity. Like this is what identifies me as a person. But then even taking that to another level to say this is how I identify myself
Mm.
with this. And
Yeah.
to the point where, you know, we can kind of pick and choose, and we can change it as we feel, you know, fit, and all that kind of or, you know, change it as we see fit. But you know, and it's where it's just kind of become anything goes. And you know, it's interesting too, even just talking on the sex positivity, how that in and of itself has really been exploited by like the entertainment industry, the pornography industry. It's been exploited to this point where I think like sex positivity, as you're talking about, has become like a scapegoat. It's become something that it's like we can label it sex positivity, and it gives us permission to just kind of push the envelope further and further and further. And we see that in so many aspects of society, that that's always what's happening. Like let's just keep pushing it further and further. Let's keep blurring the lines. Let's keep making it more and more, you know, confusing, to the point that nothing can be labeled as anything anymore.
Mm.
And to where like this is just you know, this is the normal life that has sort of, you know, developed around us over time. But things can become more and more more and more, you know, vulgar things can become sanctioned in
Mhm.
the name of something like this, something like sex
Yeah.
positivity. And you can't judge me, you can't you can't judge me, you can't whatever, because this is how I identify, this is my
Right.
identity. And so it's made it basically like almost not impossible, but difficult to speak out against these things. And it's not even just Christians. There's all kinds of people out in the world that are, you know, speaking out against this kind of stuff too, because they understand things like you're saying, that just scientifically and biologically, there are issues and there are challenges associated with this kind of thinking, where, you know, we think we can just go further and further and further down the rabbit hole. But, you know, you're not paying attention to the fact that there really are, you know, biological consequences and mental consequences and long-term, you know, issues and things like that that can develop. And as you said, I think by and large, we just sort of ignore those things.
Yeah.
But we're being exploited. People are being exploited by an ideology.
Yeah.
You know, this might be too. I don't know. I think that even when we start talking about the whole um, like gender
Mhm.
issue today,
Yep.
and with like transgenderism, and you know, like kids dealing with, you know, things like gender dysphoria, and to the like this the it's at the point where like the medical community, you know, not all across the board, but there are those in the medical community that are like encouraging, you know, children that have gender dysphoria, that don't feel that you know, that feel like they came out as the wrong sex or whatever, you know,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
they don't feel like they can properly identify with their sex as male or female, and so they want to change. But like how things like this are being sanctioned for, you know, whether we're talking about children, teenagers, or even older people as well, of okay, well, you shouldn't have to deal with that for a second longer, so let's just start the process now. To the
Mhm.
point where, you know, children are being put on like puberty blockers and things like
Yeah.
that, that stop the natural process of their growth and development so that they can change genders. And um I think that so much of that is coming from a place of greed, of
Yeah.
exploitation, of, you know, because there's pharmaceutical companies, and there's
Yeah.
the medical community that is profiting greatly off of the people. I mean, someone who is transgender who changes from one sex to another is going to be on medication for the rest of their life.
Yep.
They're going to be probably it's probably going to be for someone that does it young and that lives to in old age. It's probably going to be millions of dollars that pharmaceutical companies are going to make off of a person's life. And so I just think that there's stuff going on behind the scenes where people's emotions, people's
Mhm.
mental state, people's whatever is being exploited, in these different ways. So I don't know. I didn't really mean to go down that route. That was just sort of an example that kind of came into my mind of how, we think that we are as a society, we think that we're moving in a good direction, but we don't
Yeah.
realize, like even going back to what we talked about with the social dilemma, that there are people that are profiting off of the decisions that we're making and,
Mhm.
these things that we're doing in our lives. And, I think that that's at least part of what's behind a lot of this stuff, pushing it and driving it is that, we're like
Yeah.
giving up control or giving up freedom, but it's in a way that's being manipulated by people, on another level that we don't really fully understand, I think a lot of times.
Yeah, and gosh, there's so much of what you said that could totally be unpacked, and you're absolutely right. Any worldview that places the sum total of your identity on something that can be lost or changed, it's not good grounds. You can't have that
Uh-huh.
be the source of your identity because again, what happens when that change or you lose it? It's lost. I mean, I had a set of I saw this in beautiful craziness with a bunch of 6th to 8th graders, girls who there was a band a while ago called One Direction, and
Uh-huh.
they were diehard fans of this band. I didn't know what it was. I came into class one day. I was teaching their history co-op class, and they were all sobbing. And I was like, I was thinking somebody died, right? Because why else would people be crying? And one of them spoke up. She finally caught her breath. She goes, "Miss Amy, One Direction broke up." And I'm like, "Girl, I've got a Waze app. We can find other directions. What's the issue?" And she goes, "No, Miss Amy, it's a band." And it wasn't a band, it was a boy band. And not even a boy
Right.
band, a British boy band. So which is like the worst. They had based so much of who they were on this band that when this band broke up, they had a complete existential crisis in my class for weeks. It was like the craziest thing I've ever witnessed. Um, and and but it just exposes how, wait a second, when we have an ideology that bases the sum total of your identity on something that can be changed or lost, you have
Mm,
immense problems. You are on sand, that you're building your foundation on sand. And so much of that ideology, because there is a genuine thing, there is gender dysphoria. We're not denying that that does not exist. It doesn't exist to the extent that it's currently happening. Statistically speaking, it's jumped up like 400% just within a matter of years. It's not like all of a sudden these people are realizing, especially among girls. There's a great book called Irreversible Damage that talks about
mm,
especially how transgenderism is impacting girls, especially because they are more likely to go along with the crowd. They're finding cluster cases to where if one of their
yeah,
friends suddenly identifies as transgender, now all of a sudden all these
right.
other girls are, and these parents are feeling like their child has been whisked off to a cult because now they have no say in the matter because now they can go to public school health teachers or the nurse, or they can go to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood now can administer puberty blockers without the parents' notification or consent. Um, and so here you've got this whole movement that yes, there gender dysphoria exists, but there is also a very real ideology behind it too, and it is about control and about power and money as well. It's a huge business. I mean, there have been articles that have come out. I'll have to see if I can find it. I can send it to you, just about how the money behind the pharmaceuticals is just huge because, like you said,
Mm,
that it is not just a okay, you put on a few puberty blockers, have a vasectomy or whatever, and then you're done. No, this is
right.
lifelong. You are on these chemicals lifelong. Not only that, you have an increased risk of various cancers that you would not have had before. So now you've got treatment and preventative for that you have to be on watch for. Not only that, for any of your surgeries, your body needs to be you need to be having care for that as well. So huge, immense in it, and most counselors nowadays have to counsel from an affirming standpoint. In fact, they cannot actually do this sort of wait and see method anymore. That's actually considered a hate crime, to where you have to not
Mm,
only affirm, but you have
yeah.
to say, okay, what's the next step for your kid? And there have been studies to where they are trying to actually put chemicals within children as young as 2. They're saying, and because there was this boy, he was called Drag Kid, And what it was is when he was 2 years old, his parents had RuPaul's Drag Race on the TV. And so
Okay.
he started imitating what he saw on the television, just like most kids do. Well, his parents said, "Oh, he's transgender." Or he's at least, well, not the transgender, it's he's wants to be drag. He's
Right.
two. He wants to be drag, and so now they have nurtured this child. He's gosh, I think he's like 12 now, to where he's been groomed to where he was the one that there was a news article that came out a few years ago to where he was the boy that was dressed in drag dancing at a gay club, and they were like throwing $1 bills at him and stuff. He wants to start a drag club for kids to where you can dress in drag and go to these clubs. But here's an example of a child who at age of 2, developmentally, they're not capable of comprehending strict gender
No.
stereotypes, let alone their own gender, let alone
Yeah.
enough to say, okay, I want to be something else.
Yeah.
Um, or even to the very basic point of, oh, I want to dress in drag. He's 2. This is just behavioral mirroring, which is a normal process that all kids go through. This is why little girls stomp around in dad shoes, or little boys stomp around in mom shoes, because they see dad or mom wearing it. They like the clicky sound. It's fun to wear this stuff. Even my boys, when they were little, they would come into the bathroom and, oh, mom, what are you doing? I'm putting on makeup. Can I put on makeup? No, this is just for girls. Or it was no big thing. It was, oh no, we're not putting on makeup. I mean, you're a little kid. You don't even need makeup.
Right.
And so it's one of those things to where now we're taking normal things like behavioral mirroring and saying, oh, wait, no, these are early markers. And then, especially within transgenderism,
Mm.
it's based on strict gender stereotypes to where if you are a girl, you have to dress in this way. This is why in any of those drag shows, it's always a very over the top view of femininity, right? Like it's never just like they don't look like me when they're on these shows. No, they've got like massive, it's like they're all from the South. It's like they have massive hair and like, the big boobs and the wide hips and everything's very over the top. Again, it's just this
Right.
this hyperized view of what femininity is. And so you have to have these strict gender stereotypes to be able to operate within this ideology, because if you have a strict, okay, this is only what guys are supposed to look like or act like or think like, and this is only how girls are supposed to act, look, and think like, well, then if you have someone who's like, okay, well, I'm a girl, but like from my own experience, I'm a girl, but I'm not really into the frou-frou stuff. I like climbing trees, playing in mud, building forts, going on adventures. That was just being a tomboy. That was just normal stuff. Now it's, oh wait, you actually don't fit within the girl paradigm. You fit more in the boy. So maybe you should start considering that you might actually be a boy. And there are people who are completely manipulated by this. And one of the biggest things that's so harmful is these puberty blockers that are out now, is they say, okay, well, this gives a child more time to sort of accept who they are. Because again, depression and starting to feel like you might be transgender, they're very closely linked. Like
Mm.
they happen very often and often at the same time. But so they think, okay, well, if we transition, then that's going to help. And if we put on puberty blockers, that's going to help a child figure out if they really are transgender or not. But unfortunately, puberty plays a big role. Most kids, I believe the latest study was 80 to 90% of kids who actually have these feelings that they might be the opposite gender, it goes away by the time they're in
Right.
their late teens, like 19.
Right.
It goes away 80 to 90%. But the key component is being able to go through puberty. Because again, your whole chemical makeup is changing during puberty. And these
Mhm.
feelings that kids may have, they go away, they come to accept. But again, it's this focus on, wait, if we don't let them transition, then they're going to be more depressed, suicidal, that sort of thing. Yes,
Right.
those are very real
Right.
components, and they're
Right.
very real needs. But transitioning folks, they still have those same increase, like
Right.
3 times the rate of depression and suicide. So it's not the transition that helps. We have to look at there's other factors. And that's one thing that's so difficult, especially within that, is a lot of even physicians aren't able to interact with both sides. It's no, once a
Mm.
child comes in and says, this is how I feel, okay, now we have to go and say, okay, well, how do we get you there? They can't say, wait a second, there might be other things at play. Let's look at everything from all aspects. And we need to, and even within the church, like I think of biblical manhood and biblical womanhood, so often that can be very rigid. Like biblical womanhood, right, is if you have those like little dress outfits, and like when I was a kid, you had the shoulder pads, and you worked in the bake sales, right, or maybe in the children's nursery. That's like the sum total of biblical womanhood. And nowadays, biblical manhood is like you're basically like the male version. You're like the brawny man, right? If you're
Yeah.
plaid, you got to love football and Jesus and everything else. And
Yeah.
no, biblical manhood is just as much baking in the kitchen as it is, building something, so we need, even within the church, to sort of break down these gender stereotypes and say, no, 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 there are, you can still be just as much of a biblical woman and being active in a variety of roles just as you can a man. And gosh, look no further than the Bible. You've got Deborah, who was at the edge of battle. You had Jael, who like spiked a guy's head. I mean, there is nothing more tough than that. And then you had, for the
Yeah,
men, David was hanging out with sheep playing a flute. Like, come on, folks, that's not very manly in today's standards. But we need this. We need to be able to help people understand that there's flexibility, there's range within gender. You can still be a female and like things that are stereotypically guy.
sure.
You can be a male and have more feminine traits, and yeah, it's problematic that we don't see that. In fact, it was really interesting because Demi Lovato, right? She just came out as non-binary, and one of the
Right.
things that she said as her testimony that she was so frustrated with is not only working with Disney, but I believe she sings too. She was always dressed
Sure.
up by her stylist in this very hypersexualized way. I mean, like skin tight leather, high heels, low cut shirts, and she hated it. And so, but it was just kind of sad to me because when she was explaining this, she's like, so now I'm identifying as non-binary. It's no, you're recognizing this hypersexuality that you're not into, that you don't like, but you don't lose your feminine, the fact that you're a girl. You can just, okay, I'm not going to wear the skin tight outfits and things. I'm still very much a girl. It's she recognized that there was a problem, but then there was this huge overcorrection of, now I'm getting rid of being a girl altogether. And now I'm
Mm.
non-binary. I'm neither identifying as male or female. As no, you can still identify as female and not be, somebody's fantasy, dressed up like somebody's fantasy. It's so broken.
Yeah, for sure. Um, man, I every time you talk, I'm just like, there's so many things.
I could, yeah,
There's so many directions that
yeah,
I want to go. It's just it's it's unreal. I mean, it's really unreal, some of the stuff, and none of this is coming from, just for anybody listening to this, watching this, whatever, none of this comes from a place of hatred or
not at
judgment or
all.
condemnation or anything like that. I've heard transgender men and women, talk about how they're completely against this entire thing. It's not
Yeah,
like this is some movement that, you know it's just like transgender people leading of, like, let's turn more and more kids into,
yeah,
let's get more and more kids to transition. No, like, so much of this is, again, just, it's being exploited
mhm.
by people that have a different agenda. And
You see that with
like,
the identity claims too, because if they can claim it as an identity, then all of a sudden it's not an idea you're interacting with. Now they were almost using human beings as shields in a way. And
mm,
especially if we can have them be attractive and also children. That's why I think that a lot of this movement within kids is so prominent because, again, oh, you're attacking a child. How dare, nobody wants to attack a child. We can all agree on that. That's not appropriate. But that's the
sure.
problem, is by using human shields, that's what they're doing to protect ideology behind it. So that, yes, there's very real hurt and brokenness. Yes, there's real gender dysphoria, but there are also cases of, like you said, exploitation that's going on. And because some folks are using human shields, now we can't interact with the ideology, and that's problematic.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. um so let's just shift back, if we can,
Yeah,
to the I can't remember how far we got on it. Just shift back to the pornography discussion a little bit,
yeah,
because I did have some other questions about it, because there's definitely, it's gotten to the point now where pornography is recognized. I don't know how long this has been going on. I think it's fairly recent, where, more and more, even, secular studies and discoveries that pornography addiction is a real thing,
yeah,
talking about pornography compulsion and addiction and stuff like that. And, there's this idea that, with men in particular, that's like, well, this is just the way guys are. Like, all guys are going to look at
yeah.
pornography. It's like they have to. It's part of their
Mhm.
makeup. It's part of who they are. And again, it just kind of goes back to the same conversation of, all these things that we put in place to kind of excuse certain levels of behavior so that we can all just feel good and feel comfortable with each other. And so much of this is like, it's just a mask, or something that we can put out there that says, well, if you don't accept this, if you're not okay with this, then you're just intolerant.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, tolerance, for example, is one of those words that's just been exploited, and it's been used to manipulate manipulate people, where it's like, I think that, like just the word tolerance, like, if someone
Yeah.
tells you, well, you're not tolerant, you don't of who I am, it's like, oh, well, that's actually really not true.
Mm.
um the thing is, like, I love you, I look at you, and you're someone who's created in God's image,
Mhm.
and you're someone that Jesus loves, that he actually loves so much that he laid his life down for you. And so, like, as a child of God, as someone who follows Jesus, like, I love you, and, like, I want you to be free, I want you to have a good life, I want you to, so this has nothing to do with, like, you as a person, but we've taken words and terminology and the whole identity conversation and all of that, we've
Mhm.
taken all of these things where we've put them in a place where it's like, if you don't accept what I do, then you're not accepting me as a person, and that
Yeah.
means that, you're hateful, or even to the point of, like, this is a hate crime, or this is, you're a bigot, or you're biased, or you're a racist, or you're whatever. That whole thing drives me nuts too, because
Yeah,
we've
I think
lumped so many
everything's
of these,
racist now.
the social justice
Oh
as,
my
like,
gosh, yes.
social justice has been like, we take all of these issues and we put them all into the same category.
Right.
And so, it's like, if you're not tolerant of this type of lifestyle or whatever, like, you're in the same category as someone who's racist, like, you're in the same
Yeah.
category, because it's all lumped into the social justice
Mhm.
conversation. And anyway, it's just
Yeah, no, it's a
it's just
total war
crazy
of
how.
words, isn't it? And we're seeing that just
Mhm.
with our discussion, right? Sex positivity. It's that like at first sound it's, oh, wait a second. Yeah, positive. I want to, I'm on board with that. Anything positive. It's only until you start looking at it that you realize, wait a second, is this really that positive? Same with tolerance. Tolerance meant that we could bear a different opinion and not rip each other to threads. I mean, that's shreds. That's just good discussion. But people don't have that anymore. Now it's okay, wait, if you don't agree, endorse, and advocate what I do, any of what I do, then you're not only wrong and bigoted, you need to be destroyed, your livelihood needs to be gone,
Mm.
fire you from your job. I mean,
Right,
you will have such
right.
a social media storm on you. But again, that's just the inability to engage reasonably. And it's really sad. It really plays off feeding off emotion, right? Because if you can if you can groom people and manipulate them by their emotion, you can steer them so easily.
Mm.
I mean, and
Yeah.
because there's no forward thinking there, right? That's the amygdala reacting. So the amygdala, that's when we're young kids, right? That's why kids, especially, I have all boys in my house. So I say a lot of, what were you thinking? And the fact is they were not thinking. They just said, wow, look
Yeah.
at that. That looks like a good idea. Totally going to do it. And that's how they end up in a shopping cart going down a slide. It's there's it's just this emotional thinking of, okay, I'm going to lead by emotion. Well, that's how
Yeah.
so much of our kids and our society has been groomed to think with emotion and to be emotionally manipulated. Heck, social media, so much of that is emotion led, because again, it's not thinking, it's just, oh, let's react, let's move, let's join together, and wait a second, stopping and thinking with the prefrontal cortex, the critical thinking aspect of the brain. That takes a lot longer. That takes actual practice, and especially for adults, it takes upwards of to the age of 26 to fully develop. In males, it
Yeah.
takes
Yeah.
26 years old. But if you think about it, if they're coming from a worldly standpoint and they've only been groomed to think emotionally with that reaction, that knee-jerk reaction, of course they're not going to be thinking well about these issues. But that's how people want you to think, because then you're easily manipulated and controlled. That's why if
Mm.
you're ever in a discussion with somebody and things start getting heated, if you can ask them questions that require them to think, their anger level actually will start to go down. From in most cases, their anger will go down, because now they're having to shift from reacting emotionally to thinking critically. And
That's cool.
it's very important. But again, yeah, you see this manipulation of words, of intolerance, tolerance, bigoted, positivity. And so much of them, yeah, they're ad hominem attacks, they're character attacks. So that whole, oh, if you don't support me, then you're just a bigot. If you take out bigot, you could replace it with anything. It's just name calling. It just is more socially accepted and promoted if we say the word bigot in there. And so, yeah, it's no, wait a second, let's look and let's ask these questions. Let's go ahead and have these dialogues, because I love you as a person. And if you're actually listening to what you're believing, they're saying the sum total of your identity is who you're sleeping next to. Well, what happens when that person changes or leave, or you change, or you decide, in fact, it's so tragic, especially within the LGBTQ community, to where those who have same attraction to the same sex, they can't change those. I mean, it's just something that they have. And so where they're trying to adhere to the biblical standard of sexuality, they're actually vilified by their supposedly own community,
Yeah.
because now they're
Yeah.
practicing self-hate. Oh, because you're not living out this lifestyle, you are actually self-hating. And so it's so tragic that so many within this community, they actually have a wedge put between them and the church by saying, oh no, the church is going to hate you as a person, because they say now your sexuality is the sum total of who you are. So again,
Mm.
they're putting themselves in between them and the only thing that can heal them, which is the creator. And
Yeah.
there's so much brokenness and sadness, but again, there's also so much baggage and brokenness within the church too, to where even the church has to be careful and gentle about how they interact. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they can't be
Yeah.
any less faithful, but gosh, look at how Jesus
Yeah.
interacted. He tailored his approach
Mhm.
to each person he met, and he was very gracious to every single person. In fact, the only person he got, or people he would get snippy with, were the church leaders that were
Yeah.
supposed to know better. And
Yeah.
so
Come on.
it's so important that for us, we and I've even heard Christians who say this is, oh, because I wrote a blog post about the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir when they wrote that song, "We're Coming for Your Children." I interacted with the worldview of that song and the statements that they made within the song, which they claimed were satire. They were not satire. They're actually how the agenda is currently working. You can find this on Mama Bear Apologetics.com. And I actually had people say, basically, you weren't mean enough. I wanted more bite to you. And wait a second. I get that, but what is that going to produce? We need to be able to interact. They are engaging in a worldview battlefield. We meet them on a worldview battlefield. We can't just destroy the person. We have to go and engage the idea. And that's some of the failings within the church, especially with purity culture. Like I said, is they thought the whole issue was just about having people not have premarital sex. No, that wasn't it. The issue was the worldview and trying to take it away from God. That's the problem. And you see that in Romans 1. The sexual debauchery, that was the last thing that happened after the mind was changed. So we have to be
Right.
careful. General Jim Mattis, he says the most important 6 inches of the battlefield are the 6 inches between your ears. And it's very important. We need to be engaging in the mind, because it's mind first, then all of us. I mean, I think, gosh, we can all think of a terrible decision we made, and it wasn't just like a knee-jerk reaction like when we were kids. Most of us had to kind of talk ourselves like, oh, it's not that bad, oh, this will be okay, I'm totally going to do this, right? We're so great at talking ourselves into things. And that's how we have to see this whole issue is, wait a second, we need to engage, not just trying to put bodily, I'm going to say bodily restraints, but what I'm meaning is here, we're not trying to curb just action. We have to change mind first, because I know
Yeah.
this is
Like
terrible
Catholic
example to
monks
use
and
in a
stuff.
discussion about sex. That's not what I'm meaning, folks. Um, we have to engage the mind and change the mind, because once the mind is
Yeah.
changed, that's when we see a change in action, and that's when we see Satan taking a claim on our identity. It goes
That's right.
worldview, appetite, identity.
Wow.
That's how things go, and that's what we're seeing in the secular culture. They're making these identities claim by playing off the appetites. They're feeding in, oh, this is what you have to do if you're a guy, these are just getting your needs fulfilled. They say that to girls too. And then from appetites, where did it start off first? Worldview. Oh, there are no bounds on sex. You can do whatever you want. This is a part of flourishing. So it goes flourishing. Now we're going to appeal to the natural desires, because again, read Song of Solomon, folks. The issue was not sex. Sex is good. Even desire for the couple, the bride and the groom, they were talking about their desire for each other
Yeah.
before they were married. That's not the problem. The
Yeah.
problem is how it's used, and how it's used. So here we go. We've got worldview, it goes appetite, and then we have an identity claim that's being made.
Mm.
Julie Slattery made this great point of the worldview, appetite, identity, and that's what we're seeing in here. And that's how we also need to bring it up to our kids. discuss worldview first, talk about the good of appetites, but also the goodness within bounds and how that affirms the dignity and humanity that we have. Because again, pornography reduces the human person to an object. And we see sex positivity, especially Demi Lovato, she encouraged all her listeners and viewers to, this is her quote, be sluts. That's what she told kids. Go ahead and make porn, is what she said. Make porn. Go ahead and sleep around with who you want. Be sexual. That's just who you are. Okay.
Mm,
Well, what she's really saying is reduce yourself to an object to be used for the
right.
sexual gratification of strangers. Do whatever you want with your body. Why? Because if your body had value, you would have bounds on it. And no, there aren't any bounds,
Wow.
which means there is no value. And so we have to help kids see the
Wow.
worldview behind these truth claims, because the appetite is really strong. It's very attractive. It's natural. It's how we're wired. But again, it's proper use of that appetite.
Amy, do you think that the society would eventually get to the point where they see a need for a correction? Or do you think that this thing just keeps going further and further down? Now, I'm not talking about, I mean, of
Yeah.
course, Jesus is the answer. God is, like a biblical understanding of worldview and all of that. Like that is the answer. That Jesus is the solution. But like what you just mentioned there with this
Right.
statement of just be sluts, make porn, like just do all this stuff,
Yeah.
like the permission that's coming from these sort of higher ups in society. Do you think there's a
Mhm.
point where society in general says, hold on a second, like I think we've actually gone too far, and I think that we're actually hurting ourselves? Like, do you think there's a point where the pendulum swings so far in the other
Mhm.
direction that there's sort of a wake up that happens? Or do you think that we just kind of keep drinking the Kool-Aid and keep going
Mhm.
like deeper into this downward spiral?
Yeah.
um and just wondering what you think about that. I
Yeah,
know you
I,
don't
I
have an
would,
opinion.
I know, right? And it's so tragic. Honestly, unless they recognize the biblical standard, no, the Kool-Aid is just going to keep being drunk. And the reason I say that is because if you look, and so if you look at, and I don't recommend doing this. So there are companies, right, that have, that make sex toys and that sort of thing. And so often, especially doing research for this book, I saw questions being posed to them by teens, young teens. I'm talking 13, 14. And they're saying, okay, well, I'm thinking about trying this out. And the companies were, oh, well, we don't judge based on age. You would think that the standard, or the spot where people would say no, we've gone too far as kids, right? Like you would think that that would be where it's at, but it's not. And it goes even further than that. I believe it was Holland. It was either Holland or Sweden. It's very sexually forward, I would say,
Hmm.
within the positivity movement. So they have, it's kind of like this claymation show now, for children, and it is a man who has I think it's like a 20-foot long penis. And what it is it's his misadventures as this penis has a life of its own. It's basically like a monkey tail, but on the front of him. And it's
Okay.
the whole show is him running around town, and he's in like this 1920s looking bathing suit, like this with the stripes and everything, and he's running around town, and there's instances where there's a little boy character in the show who's eating an ice cream cone, and the penis goes and grabs the ice cream cone away from the boy and takes it away from him. Again, it's like a monkey tail, how they treat it. And this is a show that's being marketed toward kids. They see no problem with it. They go, oh no, kids just think this is funny. Kids love
Right.
physical comedy. Why wouldn't we use a penis? And so there's one episode to where this man, he uses it as a flagpole to help his neighbor lady hang a flag. And it's
Oh,
like,
it's nice of him.
oh my gosh, do we not see how, just from a predator standpoint, okay, you have a show that's marketed toward children that say, oh wow, if an adult male has his penis close to you, oh, that's something funny. That there's no harm in that. Like,
Right.
there's no even forward thinking to
Right.
that. Like, okay, wait a second, this is now desensitizing and normalizing predatory behavior. They just say, oh no, it's just funny. We just need to lighten up, is what they're saying. And that's some of the advocates for it is, oh no, this is just, kids are just thinking this is funny. So I would love to say that humanity in general would come to its senses. But if you just look at past culture, if you look at sin nature,
Mm.
it doesn't stop with kids. It just, kids are gradually included within
Yeah.
it, and
Okay.
we're seeing that within the new sex ed curriculum. It's very obvious and overt. When we were kids, you go through health class, and we were told what sex was. We weren't taught how to have it. And that is
Right.
now being
Yeah.
changed now to where there are a lot of very very it's very aggressive. And I mean, even there's even
Mhm.
books that I have found um, that are supposed to teach what sex is, and it
Right.
has cartoon drawings of small children masturbating and smiling. It has cartoons of everyone from young babies to elderly completely naked and hanging out together. And they're trying to desensitize the human body toward nudity. It's okay, we shouldn't be shocked by nudity because bodies are beautiful. Okay, bodies are beautiful, but they are also inherent with dignity, and that dignity requires special treatment. And so again, we cover up to honor that, but that's being stripped away now. So I would
Mm.
love to say that our culture will eventually wake up to it. They might, but only if they recognize that it's wrong. The only way they're able to recognize if it's wrong if it's held to an objective standard. The only objective standard that actually stands is the biblical worldview. So they're going to have to affirm at least that aspect of the biblical worldview for this to stop its spiral. But as we're
Wow.
seeing, and again, when we think of even innocuous things like fashion, right? Fashion comes first from Europe and ends up making its way here. If you've ever read Jane Austen, you know they'd be so excited about all the things that are coming in from Paris and that sort, all the new fashions. Well, now we're seeing this fashion of sexually graphic material for kids being again portrayed in sort of this harmless child manner of, oh, this is just so silly. He can't control his penis. Like, come on, folks. You would think that that would send off warnings, but again, with desensitization, not
Mm.
all desensitization is bad, but it is in this case. And we're seeing this now happening in our more sexually forward countries within Europe. I'm sorry, eventually it's probably going to end up coming here. We're seeing it with Pixar movies that are advocating LGBTQ um, issues and agendas promoting this sort of thing. So it's starting to creep into kids' cartoons again, like we saw with Bubble Guppies and Blues Clues. We have drag queens on Bubble Guppies and Blues Clues. Come on, folks. It's already being groomed toward little kids, so we're already
Mm.
there, unfortunately. And what I
Wow.
want to say, because I think a lot of knee jerk reaction is, okay, now we just need to break up with TV altogether. Which if you wanna go Amish, if you're called to by God to go Amish, then, okay. But, don't stop there, right? Because if you're not teaching your kid how to
Right.
recognize and understand the secular and biblical worldview, you've only succeeded in making your kid an easier target. And, honestly, you're
Wow.
not
Good
gonna
point.
succeed because eventually it's gonna meet your kids anyways. So, there was a great study with kids who Christian kids who were there was one group of Christian kids that were kept in the bubble and another group of Christian kids that were raised by parents who would maybe allow them to watch age appropriate but characters that were engaging in inappropriate behaviors or risky behaviors. And the parents who let their kids watch that, what they would do is they would stop and pause and discuss the implications of those actions with their kids. So they followed these kids, and what they found is when these kids reached adults, the bubble kids lost their minds in college, and once they got out of
Yeah.
the home, the kids who were actually raised to interact with this material had less risky behavior. Perfect advocation of Deuteronomy 4:10. He said to teach these precepts unto our kids so that they can carry them out, so that they can live out God's design. That word teach is, like we said in an earlier podcast, lemad, training with the implication of putting it into use. Folks, we
Mhm.
need to do sexuality and teach sexuality from a worldview standard so that our kids know how to put this ideology, put these critical thinking skills to use so they can be
Wow.
effective for the kingdom, not victims.
Wow. Okay, so I have a couple of follow-up questions. The first follow-up question would be, okay, so if you see, based on the trends of society that typically speaking, like left unchecked,
Mhm.
that society in general will probably just keep going further and further into depravity and just, further and further, probably like putting the stamp of approval on
Uh-huh.
things that are like, this is acceptable, this is fine.
Mhm.
So society as a whole. But
Yeah.
do you think that people in general would probably like even if society is telling us and like desensitizing us and society's telling us that like no like this is fine, you don't have to there's no judgment here, don't feel
Mhm.
bad about this, like this is fine, we can have these shows where like I mean this is the example, like if the penis is coming at you and like taking your ice cream cone, like that's okay, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So
That's totally normal. Like,
for,
gosh,
if anybody like tuned in right there, that would
they
be
feel like,
perfect.
what is this podcast
um
about? You got
there's
to rewind it,
context.
folks.
There's context.
Context.
But yeah, but do you think that so when we come from the other side and we have a biblical worldview, do you
Mhm.
think that because of how far, because I'm sort of the belief that, because I see it happen over and over again, how the enemy, we have to recognize, like, the enemy's behind, the stuff that's going on, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
The
the
enemy,
spiritual warfare is huge, especially within sexuality.
yeah, the enemy like always overplays his hand.
Mm.
And so I think that there's this tendency within the church for us to become impressed by what the enemy is doing instead of being impressed with how big our God is.
Yeah.
And how and I think that if we keep our minds and our hearts fixed on God and on who he is, and like we have people like you and Hillary and the Mama Bears, and I know there's other organizations that you all, and even churches and leaders and ministries that you all partner with, and if we learn how to combat this the right way biblically, not
Mhm.
like retreating, not labeling other people as sinners that are all going to hell, but like we're, what I mean, like not
Yeah,
separating
yeah.
ourselves from the world, but learning how to engage properly. It
Right.
seems to me that with all of the stuff, all of the darkness, all the negativity going on, like the darker the darkness, the more that the light shines,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that even though society in general as a whole like is probably going deeper and deeper into darker places, that the individual person, because of how dark things are, and how dark things are getting, that the individual person might be, even because of that, more susceptible with a hunger for something that
Mhm.
is real, that is authentic, that is true.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we learn how to model um model a biblical lifestyle and to live out a biblical worldview, and to, again, like, not cast I was going to make up a word just now, like ostracize people or
Yeah.
put people into a group where it's like us versus them. And, but when
Right.
we learn how to engage with people and have conversations, and that I think when people too see the life of a believer who, is living from a place of understanding that their identity only comes from one place, and
Mhm.
it's in Christ,
Yeah.
that they can, that we might be able to spark a hunger, a desire for truth,
Mhm.
as opposed to feeling, again, like impressed by the size of the problem rather
Mhm.
than impressed by how big God is, like how, and he lives within us. And
Mhm.
so I think that the world, as much as society does work from an ideology, and just seems like to go further and further in that direction of trying to unravel things and make things just more, loose and whatever, and
Yeah.
to redefine freedom into something that it's not, and that it was never meant to be, that people are always going to be looking for truth and looking for something that's authentic and looking for something that's real. And so now more than ever, I would say that what you and what this book is accomplishing, and what the Mama Bears are doing, and others like you, of teaching us how to just have these interactions with people, and how to dialogue, and how to have good conversations, and how to live from a standpoint of knowing who God is, knowing who we are in him, and learning how to live that out in real ways and practical ways where we engage with culture. I think now more than ever it's so needed.
Mhm.
And because of, again, I really do believe that so often the enemy just overplays his hand. And if
Yeah.
we won't buy into the lie, but will keep shining for truth and proclaiming the truth and the good news of Jesus Christ, that we really do have an opportunity to um, win people, and
Yeah.
to influence people in a positive way, to see who God is, and to see truth, for what truth really is.
No, there's a
Yeah.
few things that came to mind when you were talking, and there was a car commercial. I don't remember if you see it. It was a few years ago, and I always thought this was so neat. Is this car commercial was talking about how the human eye can pick up the flame of a candle from a mile away, and so like you were saying, the enemy plays its hands, and sometimes we can be so intimidated by the dark that we forget that it gives an opportunity for the brightness to shine through. I mean, even
Yes.
TVs being developed
Yes.
now, the big thing is, oh, how do we make colors stand out? We have to have a darker background. Sometimes we
Mhm.
shine the brightest, and a person can shine the brightest in immense darkness. And oh gosh, isn't that like a Harry Potter quote? I'm pretty sure Dumbledore said something to that effect. But no, it's scripture, and it's beautiful because yes, we need to be careful that we're not intimidated by how big Satan can appear, because God is always bigger. I mean, gosh, good night. Just look at how David interacted with Goliath, and just being in the face of immense persecution, how his light can shine through. And it is so possible. So we need to take our eyes off the storm and put them back on Jesus if we're going to walk
Mm,
on the water, right? And so getting information like this is so helpful, because again, it can feel so overwhelming because we're surrounded by it, right? It's not like we're going to flip on I mean, unless you put it on like the 700 Club, you're not going to find a lot of biblical stuff on your TV when you flip the channels. It's going to be the secular stuff. But don't let that distract you from the fact that there are immense resources out there to equip and make you effective for the kingdom. And two, yeah, it's one of the things we need to recognize is, and I think one of the great ways Satan kind of pulls people and makes them ineffective for the kingdom is he gets people to attack people and not recognize the ideas. And one
mm,
of the things we cover in this book is
that's good.
we're not dealing necessarily with evil people. We're dealing with captives of a false ideology. And
Mm,
especially when you think in the nature of Stockholm syndrome, right?
yes.
People who have Stockholm syndrome, they're going to defend their captor, especially when we think of someone putting that on their identity claim. They're going to say, no, this is the sum total of my identity. I have to protect this at all costs. It takes a lot more care and intention and grace with those folks to help them realize, wait a second, you're actually being held captive here. Look at what it's saying about who you are. Now this can be years in the process. I mean, that's one thing that we have to recognize is, yes, the gospel is effective and it's powerful, and there are people who have, on the very first time of hearing the gospel, have accepted Christ as their savior. But so often God puts us as sort of tenders of this garden, to where sometimes we're pulling up weeds, sometimes we're planting the soil, sometimes we're watering the soil. Sometimes we're there to kind of help a busted plant sort of get back on its grow upright again. Is we have to recognize
Yeah.
that this is a ministry, and this is a lifelong sexuality. We say worldview, it's all about discipleship. This is a lifelong process, and so we have to recognize that our war isn't necessarily with people, but the ideology. And we have to be able to lovingly but gently correct and interact with people to expose the ideology, especially if that has become their false god. And
Wow.
especially with a lot of these ideologies, they are making false identity claims. And when you say this one thing is the sum total of my identity, to ask somebody to give that up is a huge ask. Like, they are just
Yes.
not going to be like, okay, let me just go ahead and ditch everything
Yeah.
I've ever known and
Yeah.
taught and go for this. No, 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 no. That's where you have to show them, okay, how only true life and fulfillment can be found in Christ. It can't be found in these other things. And that might take a while. And it may not be something that you actually see the fruits of. We have to be okay with the fact that the Holy Spirit's in control, not us, right? We just have to be
Mm,
faithful
yeah.
witnesses. And so yeah, it's we can make, I think, a dramatic shift within this culture is not only being present in it. A lot of the problems that we're seeing within culture today, especially the entertainment industry, is because the church has stepped out of culture. That's a problem. We need to be in it because we have stepped out, we have lost ground. And as anyone who's ever been in battle or even played a video game knows, if you lose ground, it's harder to take it back. You have to put more effort into it. And so we have to recognize that, okay, we're going to have to take ground. It's going to take time. It's going to take money. It's going to take effort. We have to be pouring into people. We have to recognize that people aren't necessarily the enemy. The ideology behind it is. So that requires worldview engagement and recognizing that we are capable, even in our small selves, of making a difference for the kingdom. We may not see it, but God does. And that's what truly matters.
Wow. We fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and forces of darkness in heavenly places. As
Amen.
God's people, anytime that we find ourselves fighting against people, then that should just tell us right there that we're directing our fight in the wrong place. And we'll have disagreements, and we'll
Oh,
have
yeah.
differing opinions and worldviews and stuff like that. And the world is making it more and more, or trying to anyway, make it more and more difficult for you to actually dialogue with people, like woke culture and,
Oh, yeah.
with like cancel culture and all this kind of stuff. It's like, if you're one of those, if you think that way, if you're less tolerant, if you're whatever, then like you're not supposed to engage or interact with those people at all.
Yeah.
And,
Which is a
I
brilliant
think,
tactic of the enemy.
yeah,
Like, no, you're
for
not supposed to
sure.
talk to those people, because then you might actually,
For
experience
sure.
truth, and any truth you experience is
Yeah.
Jesus. So, yeah, it's brilliant. It's effective currently, but it's also one that can be defeated through Christ.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so never, don't, ever direct, um, your fight against people, because God loves people. God died for every single one of them. You know, those that have, in your opinion, maybe they have a completely opposite viewpoint. Maybe they stand for everything that you stand against, or stand against everything that you stand for, but they're still valuable,
Yeah.
and they're still they're still worth Jesus giving his life for. And so, um, yeah, I think that's something that we all have to keep in mind, is that, you know, whatever we're doing, however we're going about having these conversations and dialoguing with people, that the person that's on the other side of that viewpoint or ideology that you disagree with is so valuable. And, you know, whether or not you think they deserve your respect and your honor and whatever, like the point is that you don't deserve it either, like none of us do. But because of who we are, because of whose image we're created in, that it should be a part of who we are to demonstrate honor and to demonstrate the love of Christ to every single person. So yeah, Amy, I'm just going to pull this book up on the screen here for anybody watching that can see it. Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, empowering your kids to understand and live out God's, what does it say? Design.
God's design. Yep.
To live
I know
out
it's super
God's
tiny writing.
design. Yeah, it got like super small, right? Well, just for me, because it's like my screen's a little far away. But anyway, yeah, for sure, I can't recommend it enough. It's available for sale, for purchase on Amazon, ebook and paperback format. Is it available anywhere else that you would point people, or do
Yeah,
you
actually
focus on Amazon?
Target is selling
Awesome.
it. We have it available at christianbooks.com, and Christian Books, I believe right now has it for 50% off. So you may
Oh,
want to check that out. You can get a
all
good
right.
discount. So yeah, it's pretty much wherever major books are sold. I'm not sure if Hobby Lobby's selling the first one. I'm not sure if they are selling this one. But yeah, definitely Amazon, Christian Books, Target, you can reach it at. So yeah, the audiobook is coming. It's actually being recorded right now, so that's going to take a little bit to get out, but it is available in paperback and I believe digital copy.
That's awesome. Are you and Hillary reading for the audio, or yeah, are you using your voices for the audiobook, or somebody else
Hillary's
narrating?
reading it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So she's recording that right now. And oh, and I just want to say that chemical I was talking about, I said it D. I was thinking of dopamine. I was actually it's vasopressin. That's the one for the guys. That's the bonding for the guys. So oxytocin is primarily for women. Vasopressin's for guys. So I had to look it
Okay.
up. I'm like that word was bugging me. But yeah, you can get our book very quickly through Amazon or Christian Books. And yeah, it's just we hope it'll be a blessing.
That's awesome. I always learn so much from our conversations, and talking with you, it just challenges me to think better, you know? And I know, like, for any of us, but I'm just gonna talk about myself. Like, I know I could be so limited sometimes in the way that I think. And so one of the major blessings about doing this podcast has been being able to talk with people and have conversations that go beyond like my area of expertise and what I understand and things like that. And I really value um, the conversations that we've had, Amy. I really value, you know, this time, and I think that you know, you really brought out some serious truth that's going to be a blessing to a lot of people. So thank you so much. Is where else would you point somebody to that just wants to find out more about who you are, you and or the Mama Bear Apologetics, and just to find out more, check out some other resources in addition to the book?
So we've got a great resource list on our website. But yeah, mamabearapologetics.com is the easiest way to reach us. I'm on social media a bit. I'm probably not the I don't interact too much with like any sort of the negative stuff. It's just kind of pointless to me. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
Twitter, you can reach me. I'm at salt, the letter N, and then Grace 46. That's how you can reach me on Twitter. And yeah, you know, it's one of those to where we really love this ministry and we really love helping and equip others. And I'll even send you like a book list because I had done a talk at my church, and I had done up a great book list for anyone who wants to know specifically in the area of sexuality. If you want other resources to go and pour into, hands down recommend Love Thy Body. And that's a fantastic book by Nancy Pearcey. But I'll send you a list, Duke. And that way, if anybody contacts you and they want more resources, particularly to this issue, you can just like shoot them an email to that. So, but yeah, you know, it's we're reachable through that website. We love ministering to others and helping others. And just if you have a question or a concern, we write emails back and forth to other moms and parents who said, okay, well, I'm encountering this issue. What do you think? And we're available on Facebook too, Mama Bear Apologetics. On Facebook, you can reach us, message us. A lot of times, it's one of us Mama Bears that'll pick up even on the messenger. And we're always willing to help build others up and to point them to resources that can help get them the answers that they're looking for.
Mm. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thanks for taking the time to listen, watch, however you consume this podcast. Really, really appreciate you. If it blessed you, if it added any value to your day, if you'd consider subscribing, sharing, leaving a review, I would super appreciate that. But make sure, most of all, that you check out this new book, Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality. It's awesome, and it's already out there doing great things, and it's going to impact the world, I think, in a really tremendous and powerful way. So thank you again, Amy. Really appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Always Luke or Duke.
You are not the first person who's done that,
I'm
by the way,
sure
on the
I'm
show.
not. And it was just one of those slips. Like, I know who you are. So
you almost made it through. We were
almost, and then I screwed it up right at the end. Like, seriously, Amy, get it
and you just
together.
blew it.
This is
We're
just
gonna have to
shameful.
re-record the whole thing.
The whole
We're
thing.
gonna
Like,
to-
this
we
is
have
all
to start
scrapped
over.
now. I'm
I
gonna
hope you
go
have
and
another
eat.
2 hours on your hands.
I know. I'm gonna have to go eat
Gotta
my
start
Columbus
over.
Day turkey in shame now because I messed up your name in the last 5 minutes.
I need to get a Columbus Day turkey. That's awesome.
It's gonna
I love
happen
that.
now. It's got to be a thing. It's like practice for Thanksgiving, right? So any excuse
Yeah.
to have gravy.
Yeah, we opened our presents last night on Columbus Day Eve. That's how my
You
family
you
does it.
really
So
should. You got to sing the
yeah.
Columbus carols. It's
Columbus carols.
this needs to be a thing, people. Come on, I know some of you are
They
creative.
have like
Like write
cookies in
some
the shape
Columbus
of the
cookies,
Nina, the
cakes.
Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
This needs that would be so great. Everybody's got their little hats. Oh my gosh, this could be a thing. This could be a movement. We need to start this. This needs to be on
I
Pinterest.
think it's already starting. It's like when we brought back the fanny pack. It's just gonna
Oh
be
gosh, that was
yeah,
a terrible decision.
we can get enough
Like,
people on board.
like I'm sorry, that one just needs to go. Like that and mom jeans. I'm like, no one thinks that's a good idea. Like nobody ever. It just looks like you time traveled to 1995 and stole jeans from your fat uncle. It's just not cute.
But what's crazy though is that like the fanny pack somehow it got like bigger. Like you would
Well, and
think.
do you see people wear it across themselves now? Like it's not even
Yeah.
across the waist. Like it's somehow cooler if you strap it to the front of your chest. Like, I don't know, you're a marsupial.
Yeah. Marsupial. This is called winning as an adult. Like I have all my stuff right here.
Yeah,
Like
all my stuff right here with the side zip.
It's all accessible.
Let me pull out my wallet.
It's so good.
Oh my gosh, this is terrible.
Uh,
Store some mints.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate you again.
You're welcome, Duke.
And I'm not done here with this. So like I know I tell you this every time, but I'd love to do this again at some point. So
Of course.
I know
On Flag Day, we got to do it.
We can talk. When is Flag Day, by the way?
I think it's like in April.
The idea. It seems
I don't
like it
know.
would be like in the spring. It seems.
Yeah,
like
it does seem like it because you got to have the breeze, right? And so yeah, I'll have a flag behind me, a couple flags.
And maybe like Arbor Day could be.
Arbor Day.
could-
So I like
could be
trees,
the
so I'm in
next one.
favor of like some Arbor Day stuff. Like I'm gonna wear a squirrel costume. It's just
I literally remember being in school because like I went to Christian school when I was in my younger years, and
Mhm.
I remember like so we had really small classes, and I remember like literally going outside and like planting trees for
Yeah.
Arbor
Do you
Day.
remember how the schools used to give the little pine trees? Like they would have like the little paper cup with the pine tree, and you're supposed to go home and plant it. So many trees died because they got left in kids' backpacks. Like it was a great effort that
Like a
just
week
didn't work
later, there's
out.
just dirt and pine needles.
I know.
all
They're like,
over
what
your,
just happened here? Yeah. No. Oh, it's terrible. Terrible. Love Arbor Day. We're gonna yeah. That's what we got to do. We got to meet on the next like random holiday to wear. And I know there's stuff like every day now has a thing. There's like
There
Reese's
are
peanut
holidays
butter
for
cup.
yeah. There's like a Frisbee Day, like National Frisbee Day. There's like
Okay.
everything you can imagine.
Those
there's
guys at the
a
park are like,
there's a
yeah,
holiday.
Frisbee Day.
Yeah, like yeah, for sure. That's my people
For
right
sure.
there. That are
For
the
sure,
National
bruh.
Frisbee Day.
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh. This is awesome. I love
Yeah.
it. I hope people are tuning in right now and they're like, "What is this about?" Like,
They're just rambling about random stuff.
yeah, this is we're subscribing just for the randomness of this.
Please, hey, if that's what gets you here, I'm happy.
We'll
I'm
talk
cool
about
with it.
random stuff all day long.
There will be some at some point there will be some worthwhile content on this channel. But right now, we're just
Be
talking
like
about
flickers.
gotta watch all the way through. Every once in a while,
All the
there'll be
way
a little
through.
nugget of truth
Yeah.
surrounded by this kind of
Mm,
stuff. That's
yeah.
probably how I should do it. Probably how I
It's like the
should do it.
bloopers at the end of the movie. Like everybody likes the movie, but they stick in their
It's
seats at
true.
the to see all the randomness that happens at the end. And that's what this is. It's just like Columbus Day, Arbor Day, Flag Day. Yeah, we're gonna do it.
Uh, all right. Well, happy Columbus Day to you, Amy, and to
Thank you
everybody
so
who's
much.
listening, watching. Appreciate you guys. You're awesome. Have fun celebrating. Um,
Send us
enjoy
your
the
pictures.
festivities. Yeah, send us your pictures. Put it up on the gram.
Yeah.
All
Oh yeah,
your
do it for the
Columbus
gram.
Day pictures. Yeah.
Bonus points if you have a tricorn hat. Like seriously. I'll send you a book if you have a tricorn hat. That's gonna bite me. I'm I'm poor. Please don't send me a lot of
Thousands,
pictures.
thousands of books. Yeah.
Thousands of books with all these tricorn tabs. I'm sorry. The first person who sends it to me, I'll send it to. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. First person.
First
Yeah,
person.
that's great. All right.
All
Let's
right, we'll see you later, Duke.
wrap it up. Appreciate you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye everybody.